Hello, everybody. Welcome to another day of the Web Development Bootcamp. I'm so happy to be here with you today. My name's Ramon, and we're doing some free lessons. If you're joining for the first time, welcome. If you're looking at this and being like, oh gosh, this looks so cool, I want to join in, don't worry. Everything's on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, of course, it's on this channel. But here, let me give y'all a link here with some banners. So if you go to youtube.com/at bad website club, you'll find all of the recordings as well as the upcoming ones, the upcoming live streams for this bootcamp and the JavaScript one that we'll be doing in February. So don't miss that. If you're joining in, please also note that we'll be expecting you to, by joining, to abide by this code of conduct. That's bit.ly/BWC dash COC. And here you'll be able to find the rules that we expect y'all to follow. Please, if you see anything out of sorts, please let myself or Jess know. And finally, if you wanna, we actually have a Discord channel where y'all can join in. Let me grab that because I keep forgetting where that link is. And I want to make sure that I don't have the wrong one. So there we go. If y'all join the Discord chat here. Oh, thank you very much, Jess, for helping me. Jess is helping me out with some links here. Yeah, we'll post that Discord link as well as everything else that y'all need. And yeah, well, you know what? That's enough of me. Thank you so much, Jess. And hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in. Cool. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to stop jabbering on and let's get right to what we'll be doing today. Today, we're going to be doing the Learn HTML Forms by Building a Registration Form set of exercises. So just to put some context as to where we are. Over this week, we've done 3 set of lessons. We've done the cat photo app. We've done the cafe menu where we learned some basic CSS. Yesterday, we did the CSS colors by building a set of colored markers. And today, we're going to be doing the HTML form exercise by building a registration form. This will be super fun. So let's hop right in. We already did a little bit of forms in the first one. Oh, there we go. So this is what we're going to be building. So we're going to have this very, very cool looking lighter text on a darker background with a form with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fields. So this is a form with 10 fields. We've got first name, last name, email, password, personal or business account. These are called radio buttons. We're going to be looking into these as well. Uploading a profile picture, our age and years. How'd you hear about us? Ooh, we've got a drop-down menu and a longer form text field, as well as a checkbox for accepting terms and conditions. So yeah, what I would encourage y'all to do is to please ask any questions. If you have them, we'll be putting in links and we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A, hopefully. And Jess puts it so well. A field is a form item that accepts user input of some kind, and we'll be using a bunch of different input types for our forms. So let's do it. Let's start coding. Now, first, we got to start with building our website. And this is stuff we've done loads of times before. So we'll do our doc. We're going to start with our HTML, doc type HTML declaration. All done. And our code looks good. So we're just going to go through this. This is called, we've used this term a couple times already. This is boilerplate code. So just stuff that we see in pretty much every website. So we'll have got our HTML tag. And that HTML tag has a lang attribute set to EN for English. Looks good. Great. Next, we're going to add our head and body tags. Again, this is stuff we've already done a couple times by now, so this should feel pretty familiar by now. Cool. There's our head and body. So let's keep going. Let's get to the good stuff. Ooh, all right. So Free Code Camp is, of course, free, as it says in the name. We're doing this in using their platform, but we're not affiliated with them. We're just, collaborating with them. So they depend on donations. If you can, if you can send them a couple of dollars a month. I'm, for example, doing so on a different account of mine, but this is my teaching one. So I'm just going to click on Ask Me Later. And again, please, 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 please feel free to click on Ask Me Later and do so when you can. All right, so cool. We got our title tag. which is going to have the content registration. If I could spell form, amazing. And then we're going to have our meta char set. Yeah, we've seen this char set. This is the one that lets us display all most kinds of characters, such as the accent in the O in my name. So that's that. Looks good. All right. Woo, wonderful. So next, we're going to start integrating our CSS right away. So in order to do that, still in our head tag, we're going to add a link tag. Rel attribute set to style sheet. This is just to tell it, hey, I'm going to be linking a style sheet here. And the ref, or the resource locator where it's located, is going to be in the same folder under the file styles.css. Now you might be wondering, but we don't have a styles.css file yet. But we're going to get it in just a minute. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Good morning. Cool. So now within our body, we're going to start writing some HTML. So I'm going to add an H1 tag, give it the value registration form. Cool. This is stuff we've done before. Nice big registration form. Looks good. And below that heading, we're going to use the following text with a paragraph element to encourage users to register. Now, here's what's interesting. It hasn't told us what tag to use. So now we're starting to get a little bit of like muscle memory for what we should be using here. So a paragraph element, I remember, is a key element. But what if I don't remember? Don't worry. That's what the MDN references are for. So I like to go to, for example, MDN and type in the search paragraph. In fact, let's do that right now so I can show you all what I'm talking about. So I go to MDN, look that up real quick. So here on MDN, I'm going to type in paragraph and check it out. There's the paragraph element. So that's a good way to remember for me. Or as Jess very correctly says, ask someone who knows or look it up. Love it. So cool. There's our paragraph element. Let's check our code. And number 3, get weird and experiment. Those are great rules to live by. So let's check our code. Looks good. And we're moving right along. So now we're in CSS. See that now we've got our styles.css file. And because we already created that link in the HTML, we can already start writing our CSS. So, the VH unit is a new type of unit, and we've already used a couple of units like px for pixel and percent for percentage. So this is a relative unit that is relative to 1% of the height of the viewport. And in the viewport, we've seen it a little bit. You remember we were using that viewport stuff in the HTML to make our pages look friendly on mobile. The viewport is how much of the site here is visible. Of course, on a phone, the viewport is the phone. It's the full screen. So depending on whether you have it in portrait or landscape mode, that viewport's going to be adjusted accordingly. Here, the viewport is this big. Oh, you can see my cursor. Yeah, it's about this big. So let's do some CSS here. So we're going to be giving the body a width of 100% and a height of 100 VH. So that's 100% of the height. So now y'all might be wondering, why would I say VH instead of percent? And I'm going to show y'all something interesting in just a moment. So that body is going to have a width of 100%. Oh, people that is asking, what class is this? Let me give y'all a link there. Boop. Just posted it into the chat. So, right. So we got a width of 100% and a height of 100 VH. Now it doesn't look all too different, except keep an eye on this scroll bar here. Look, now it's got a little bit of extra size. So let me take that away. And you know how we're going to do this, my friends? We're going to do this with my favorite, background color debugging. So let's set the background color to red to see what's, no, I have choice here. Rebecca purple. I like this color. So we can use this Rebecca color, purple color to see what's going on here. So here, yeah, the body's got the full width, but the height is now 100 VH. And notice it goes a little bit lower. See the scroll bar appeared. And I bet we're going to learn why this is happening in just a moment. So let's check our code. Looks good. And we'll keep going. So first, we're going to get rid of that horizontal scroll bar by setting the body default margin added by some browsers to 0. Ooh, Jess puts it so well. By adding a background color, we can make our invisible conceptual rectangles visible. I love that. Thank you. All right. So yes, our margin, see, and you can see there's a little bit of a margin. Remember yesterday we learned a little bit about margin and padding. We've got a little bit of margin here between the leftmost side and the topmost side. So the body, some browsers will add a little bit of margin. So we're resetting it to 0. Check out what happens. Huh? So now everything's at the top left. And in fact, notice our scroll bar is gone. Amazing. Looks good. Let's keep going. Cool. Now we're going to make that background easy on the eyes. Oh, we're going to do a little bit of hexadecimal color. If y'all remember from yesterday, hexadecimal color is done with a hashtag and then 3 pairs of values. These go from 1 to F to denote a value between 0 and 15 to see how much red, how much blue, and how much green. Let me try that again. How much red, how much green, and how much blue, RGB. So first is the red, that's 1B. So that's going to be 1B, that's going to be from 0 to 255, but represented in hexadecimal. That's a good amount of red, a good amount of green, and 32 sounds a lot more blue. So a little bit of red, a little bit of green, a lot of blue. And now we can already, whoops, sorry. Now we can see already we've got our nice nice soft background. However, we can't see the text. And that's why we're going to be setting the color. Now, color, you might think, what about text color? So in CSS, color is for the text. Background color is for the background. So I'm going to use our hashtag F5. F5 sounds like a lot of red. F6 also sounds like a lot of green, a little bit more green than red. And F7 is even more blue. So it looks very, very light. It's a very, very light gray, almost white, but it's got just a tiny bit more green and even more blue than it does red. So that looks good. Got our green stripe. We can keep going. Amazing. So as suggested by the title, we're creating a form. So we're going to set up our next form. So this is the form tag. We've seen it in a previous lesson, but just to go over it again, a form represents a set of fields that when we click on a submit button will be sent to a server. Oh, we got a question. So basically you play around with different screen sizes to decide which combo of VH, PX, RM to use for which elements. Yeah, so VH, REM, those are both relative. Those are both relative units. A pixel is a discrete unit or a static unit. There's a term, but y'all know what I mean. So it means like a pixel is always a pixel, whereas a VH is a percentage is relative to the size of the viewport. So REM can be several pixels, can be 5 pixels, can be 10 pixels, depending on the size of your viewport. So what I would suggest, Nikita, is to be consistent. If you pick one if you pick one unit of measurement, try to stick to that one as much as possible. This is my preference, but your mileage may vary. Your experiences may be different. Okay, so we've got our form, and then we've got to set our action. And this is an attribute of a form tag that says where the form data or the inputs or the field values are going to be sent to. So it's going to be sent to registerdemo.freecodecamp.org. And that's done. We've set up our form. We don't see anything in it yet. Like most divs, like most things, it is there. We just don't see it yet. So because it doesn't have any content. So cool. That's working. Let's keep going. Here we go. The method attribute specifies how to send form data to the URL specified in the action attribute. we can also specify what kind of method we're using. So, a method is how we communicate with a server. This is called an HTTP method. And you might have seen these before, a GET request, a POST request. If you're not familiar, this is how we communicate with a computer or a server somewhere on the internet. And actually, even if you don't think you've ever done it, you're actually doing a whole lot. And I'll give you an example. When you open the YouTube page to go watch this video, your browser is sending a GET request to the YouTube server to say, "Hey, can I get the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript for this page, please?" And then it responds with that data. And your browser just knows what to do from there. That's called a GET request. When you're doing a POST request, you're sending data to a server. So most forums are going to use a POST request. And you're seeing here that sometimes it's capitalized, sometimes it's not. In the HTML itself, we're not going to capitalize it. But again, it's not case sensitive. It's just a good idea to be consistent. So I'm going to go with not capitalizing it. Now, just like all other attributes, the order in which you put them into a tag does not matter. So I went with this order, but it can also be a different order. So we're going to get this form method to be post. So we're going to send some data. We're going to post some data to a server. So that looks good. Now we're going to use this field set element to add sections to our form. So field set is more of a semantic kind of element, like we would see like articles or main or article main header footer. We're going to see those later as well. And this is just going to be used to separate some of these form inputs or fields. So we're going to add 3 of those within the form element. So we're going to be lazy, my friends. We're going to copy, paste, copy, paste. So that's 1 field set element, 2 field set elements, 3 field set elements. And there we go. We've added all 3, our code passes, and we could keep moving. Woo. Okay, so we're going to be adding labels to our first field set. We're going to add 4 labels for name, email, and password. But I don't think and check it out. Huh, I wasn't paying attention. There we go. There's the 3 field sets. Oh. Ooh, Mark has got a point here. Since the method post is more secure in terms of handling sensitive data entries to the form, what kind of form would be using the get method to be more appropriate? And frankly, I'm gonna bookmark this because I can't think of an example off the top of my head. But if somebody else has an answer, please do post it into the chat. I would most of the time use a post request, frankly, but that depends on what the server is offering. So anyway, sorry. We've got our 4 labels. So I'm just gonna put in our label tag, and this is a label for a field. So I'm gonna put in 1, 2, 3, 4 labels. I'm not gonna tell them what they are yet, and I'm sure that'll come up. And there we go. So we got our 4 labels in our first field set. Amazing. Here we go. So now we're going to add text to our labels, and that's going to come in the form of content. So I'm going to be lazy. Enter your first name, I'm just going to do some copy pasting. Enter your last name, enter your email, and make sure that you're getting that content here inside that tag. So create a new password. And check it out. There it is. Enter your first name, enter your last name, enter your email, create a new password. Now, this looks a little messy, and that's because we haven't actually gotten the inputs in yet. And they're kind of like next to each other. So we still got a little bit of a way to go for this form. But we're making excellent progress. So let's check our code. And it looks good. We'll keep moving. Ooh. Okay. So here comes our next unit, which is called REM. And I think somebody mentioned them earlier. Was it Nikita? Yeah, it was Nikita. So the REM unit is a unit that is relative to the font size of our website. So every website has a default font size. I believe the default font size here is going to be something like 10, 11, or 12 pixels, something like that. And so the rest of these relative units, or REM, are based on that. So let's see what we got here. As label elements are inline by default, they're all displayed side to side, which we can see here. To make them appear on separate lines, we're going to add display block to the label element and a margin of 0.5 rem0 to separate them from each other. Cool, let's give that a try. So all of our label elements, let's start with this display block. Remember that display inline displays them next to each other. Display block is going to put them one on top of each other. So by default, labels are inline, but we're going to make them blocks. And we're going to give them a margin, 0.5 rem, 0. So, excuse me. So this, so what have we done here? We've done enter your first name, have a top and bottom margin. Because remember, this corresponds to the top and bottom, and this one corresponds to the left and right. So there's no left and right margin, just the top and bottom one. And it's 0.5 rem, so it's half of that default font size. And there we go. Whew, making good progress. We're going so well. So inside each label, we're going to add an input element. So we're going to add each input after the label text and include a space after the colon. So that's a lot that we're going to do here. Let me make sure I'm going to remove my preview so I have some space to work with here. So I'm going to add 4. So we need to add each input element after the label text and include a space after the colon. So there's the colon, space, input. And this is a spoiler for the next lesson, but input is a self-closing element. So I'm just going to remove that closing one just for now. Input, and input. Cool. We've added those 4 inputs. Let's open the preview and take a look. And there we go. There's our 4 inputs. Amazing. Let's keep going. Ooh. So now we're going to do a little bit of accessibility. So we're going to link the input elements to their label elements using the for attributes. So what does this mean? Let me just close my preview real quick because we're not actually going to see a difference here. So let's start with each of the inputs. Each of the inputs are going to need an ID, right? And this ID is going to be first name here. This input is going to be ID last name. Then we're going to have the ID set to be email. And this ID is going to be new password. So each of these has an ID. Now we're going to link each of the labels to their corresponding input. This is done for accessibility. So when we're using, for example, a screen reader to navigate this website, then we'll know that this label is linked to this input. So we need to use for, and the value we put in this for attribute corresponds to the ID of the input. So it's going to be first name, for last name, for email, and finally for new password. And notice we got to make sure first match, first name, last name, email, new password, new password. Amazing. Notice that here, we do actually have a benefit. When I click on the label, it highlights the input. So that's extremely helpful. We actually have a question here. Does clicking the label for still focus you into the checkbox? Yeah. Your timing was amazing. Thank you. Cool. Let's check our code. And it looks good. Whew, let's keep going. Cool. So next, we're going to specify the type of this input. So because, of course, different inputs are going to have different types. And there's a whole bunch of these. For example, we've got text, email, even password, and these differ. They will look the same, but for example, when you're using these inputs on a different kind of device, oh, Kira says very correctly, you don't need the for this to happen. Thank you. My bad. It's because it's inside the input. The input's inside the label. Um, sorry. So, uh, for example, when we're using a mobile device, using the email will automatically change our keyboard on our phone to show the at sign, which is super helpful. Password type will right now I can type in any password and it'll be visible. When I make its type to be password, it's going to show the dots, which makes it secure. Ooh, and it also warns if the site does not use HTTPS. And you might have seen those warnings sometimes on your browser when it says like, hey, this website is not secure. That's when it's not using HTTPS, which is a way of safeguarding your website. Not something we need to be concerned about for these lessons. So, where were we? We need to set the types for all of our inputs. So, first and last line are going to be a text, email is going to be email, and new password is going to be password. I'm going to hide the preview here to give myself a little bit more space. Cool. So, again, remember the order of the attributes doesn't matter. Here's text. The type here is also text. The type here is email. And the type here is password. I cannot wait for y'all to see this because it looks super cool. So this works just fine. This works fine. Now, we're not going to be able to see it until we submit it, but this is also going to validate that this is a proper email. And the password, check this out. Now it's hidden. Now, I've got a couple questions coming in here, and I'm gonna bookmark them for later just to make sure I get let y'all down several rabbit holes because these are really interesting questions. So let's check our code. Looks good. Let's keep going. My browser's asking me if I want to save that password. No, thank you. So the first input of ooh. So next, we're going to add our next input, which is of type submit. And this is going to show up as a button that lets us submit our form. So to handle the form submission, we're going to add a input element of type submit in below the last field set, and its value attribute is going to be set to submit. So let's go all the way down here. We're going to add a new input of type submit with the value submit. And there we go. There's our, and you see, just like that, we got a new submit button. Now let's see what happens when we click on it. So the form was, normally this form would be submitted. It works. Now you can't see it here, but I got a little pop-up that says, hey, this works. And I don't know why I didn't try and validate the email address. Probably something that comes later on. Let me put something here. Test. I submit now. Hey, can you see it? Yeah. Right. So I tried putting in an invalid email address and it's saying, hey, please include an at sign. Test is missing an at sign. Season says HTML is so wacky. I love how changing the type attribute can just turn a text box into a button. Yeah. Cool. So that looks good. Code test. Our code passes and we can keep going. Ah. Now we should be able to submit our form, but yeah, we're seeing that not much happens. So, ooh, in order to make our form more interactive, we're going to be adding the required attribute to our elements in the first field set. Let's give it a try. So now you notice that there's no value for that attribute. So the way it's going to look is like this: input required. It doesn't have a value, it just says required. Now, what's interesting is this first name field is now required. And our browsers are smart enough to know that if we click on submit now, it's going to be like, hey, please fill in this field. So I'm going to do that for all of them. Required, required, and required. Let's see what happens now when I try to submit. It tells me to please fill in the first name. So I'm going to be like test. Now saying submit the last name. Test. Please fill in the email address. If I put in test again, it's saying, hey, hold on. This needs to be an email address. So test at test. Does that work? Yeah. And our password needs to have a value as well. And this is how we make it a lot more straightforward for our users using just the browser to say, hey, please fill in this form fully. All right, let's check our code. Looks good. And we'll keep going. So let me just turn that off. There we go. So, see, certain type attributes come with built-in form validation. For example, type email address require that the value be a valid email address. We already saw that, which is super cool. We can also customize the validation. And the validation is a form of the browser saying, hey, make sure that this field is filled in the way we want it. For example, a password will need to have, in our case, a minimum length of 8 characters. Let's give it a try. So if I go to my input for new password, and then I type in min length set to 8. See what happens when I fill in the form now. Test, 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 and I'll give the password the value test. Check this out. Submit. Please lengthen this text to 8 characters or more. You're currently using 4 characters. If I change this to 16, it's the same thing. So test, 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 test. Now it's saying, hey, please lengthen this text to 16 characters or more. So that's how we can add this validation to make sure that our passwords are of a minimum length using this min length attribute. Then we can give it a value. Check our code. Ooh. Oh yeah. You should give the min length value attribute a value of 8, and I had it at 16. My bad. Sorry. There we go. Now it's set. We got that green stripe. Everything looks good, and we can keep going. Ooh. Okay. So we can use the pattern attribute to tell our form's validation. Remember this check that everything looks good. We can use this pattern attribute to say what kind of characters we want. And this is going to be using this. We're going to be adding this quite interesting looking piece of code here. This is called a regular expression. And if you've heard of regular expressions and go like, oh my goodness, no, not regular expressions, don't worry. Later on, I think in the middle of the JavaScript bootcamp, we're going to be doing a little bit of regular expressions there, and we'll become extremely good at them. So what have we got here? This is a regular expression that matches 8 or more lowercase letters or the digits 0 to 5. So it can be 8 characters. It needs to be at least 8 characters. That can be any character that's a lowercase letter or the numbers 0 to 5. So we're going to add that pattern and then remove the min length attribute. Cool, let's give it a try. This is a very strict password. So we'll go with pattern, and we're going to paste that in, and we're going to remove the min length. Let's give it a try. Test, test. Now I'm going to type in hello world with some exclamation marks. Now it says, please match the format requested. If I just type in hello world, that should be okay. Yeah, it works. And that's how we can add some stricter pattern matching to our passwords. I'm going to check our code, and it looks good. We'll keep on moving. Now we're going to move on to the second field set. So we're going to start, and this is going to look pretty familiar by now. We're going to add two labels. Label, gotta be lazy. I'm going to copy paste. So we've got two labels. Now we can't see them yet, but notice they add a little bit of space. Check our code. Amazing. So users will be allowed to choose either a personal or business. So we're going to add two inputs in there of the type radio. Remember, we were talking about 8 radio buttons before. So input type radio. There we go. There's our radio button. And I'm going to go ahead and copy that and paste it into the next one. So now we've got two radio buttons. Now I might be thinking, cool, I've got my radio buttons ready, but look what happens when I click on both of them. They're showing up as both blue, and really a radio button should be able to choose one or the other. And we're going to link these together so you can see so you can, let me try that again. We're going to link these together and then you'll see that they'll be independent once again. So cool. Code looks good. Let's keep moving. Mark has such a good question, and I'm going to save it for later. So, within our corresponding label element, we're going to, and immediately after the input element, we're going to add a space and the following text. So, after our input, we're going to add a space and personal and space business. There we go, business, personal or business. Still lets me click on both. We're going to fix that in a bit. Let me check our code. Looks good. Let's keep going. So we want our radio button to be only be able to select one of them. So we need to tell the radio buttons, we need to give them a name so that if they have the same name, it'll know that they're related. We're going to be using the name attribute, and we're going to give it the type, the value account type. So for both our radio buttons, we're going to type in name equals account type. And I'm going to copy and paste that. So now with the name attribute, both of these radio buttons are related. Check it out. So the browser is clever enough to know, okay, these both have the same name. They correspond to the same field name. It's not the name of the input. It's the name of the field, right? So the field that we're filling in is called account type. The value is either personal or business. So let's check our code. That looks good. So we'll keep going. So what's our problem here? We can submit the form without checking the radio buttons. Although we previously used the required attribute to indicate that an input is required, it won't work in this case because adding required to both inputs will convey the wrong information to users. Oh, Cesium makes such a good point. Be careful to notice the difference between the name and an ID. This used to confuse me a lot, and definitely. So the name of the field is not the same as the ID of the input. Okay, to solve this, we'll provide the context of what is needed by adding a legend element with the text account type required before the label elements within the second field set. Okay, so we're going to do two things in here. First, we're going to add a legend element. Let's close it. And this is going to have account type required. Oh, that's what the legend is for. That looks so cool. Oh, wow. I know I've used it before, but I always forget. I'm going to use this much more often. Where was I? Oh, yes. And then in the personal input, we're going to add the checked attribute. And again, this one doesn't have a value. So you're going to see what happens. Checked. Now, by default, it's going to be checked. Let's see what happens if I do it for the business one. See, right now, neither of them is checked. If I put in checked here, it's going to be checked. What happens, because I like some chaos, what happens if I put it in for both? notice it takes into account the last one that was declared as checked. If I remove this checked one, then it works again. Good to know. So really, in a radio button, only one of them can be checked if they have the same name. So that looks good. Amazing. Let's keep going. Cool. We're going to use the for and ID. Is that true? Input elements and the label elements. So we're going to use personal account and business account. And this is going to link that label and that input. So let's start with the labels this time. So this is for personal. So for personal account. This is getting quite condensed, isn't it? I'm going to hide the preview for a minute. So I'll do the other one for business account. So, and then for our inputs, we're going to use the ID of personal account. And the ID for this one is going to be business account. Yeah, see, got to make sure this for and ID match. Amazing. Does that work though? How does it look here? Looks the same. Does our code look good? And it does. Wonderful. Moving on. So, the next part we're going to do is make sure that our user has read the terms and conditions. So I'm going to add a label here. And we're going to, inside at label, add an input with the type set to checkbox. So input type checkbox. Notice, here it is. We're going to add the ID and 4 attributes with the value terms and conditions. I'm going to copy paste that because I'm lazy. So 4 terms and conditions and ID terms and conditions. So now these are linked for accessibility. I think that's it. Let's give it a try. Ooh. I forgot to make it required. My mistake. We should add a required attribute to the input element. And this is what I love about Free Code Camp. It's extremely helpful in catching me out in my mistakes, of which I make a lot. So there's our required. That should be good now. Let's give it a try. Check our code. But hey, if it's required, does that mean, let's give it a try. Fill stuff in. Please tick this box if you wish to proceed. If I tick it now, there we go. I can submit the form. Amazing. Now we're going to add the text, I accept the terms and conditions immediately after the input element. And then we're going to make terms and conditions a link. Oh, that's a lot. Okay, let's do one at a time. I'm already excited. So first we're going to add this text. I accept the terms and conditions. Cool. And that comes right after the input element with a space, I would assume. Is that correct? Yeah, I would assume it's with a space. By the way, folks, one thing to watch out for if you're copying and pasting, sometimes some of these like spaces maybe get a little bit messy. And so like you'll find that sometimes it's not accepting this. I remember the last time we did this boot camp, we had somebody with this problem. So like keep an eye out for that. So, okay, cool. I accept the terms and conditions. Let's check our code. And that's because we haven't, we got to make a link. We're going to use the A element in terms and conditions for this here. So I'm going to click here, copy all of that. So starting from terms and conditions. So I'm going to open up an A element here. I'm going to close it here. Cool. Then I need my ref. And there I will paste in the link to the terms and conditions. Did that work? Yes, it did. So check it out. Now it's a link, and notice the link got styled. It's blue, it's underlined. If I click on it, you can't see it because of my screen share, but it says, hey, you've just gone to the terms and conditions. So test, test, test. And if I try and submit now, it's going to tell me, hey, please tick on this box. If I click on it, and because it's a checkbox inside a label, I can click on the text to check the box. Ooh, Cesium makes a good point here. MDN says it's bad for accessibility to have a link inside a label like this. Cesium, I think you're not allowed to uh, send links on YouTube. I need to figure that out. However, if you want to send me a link on another place, I'll happily share that link, please. Where was I? Right. Does that work? Ah, it does. Amazing. Cool. We did it. So there's our form, all nicely done. But now we've got our final field set. So first we're going to do allow a user to upload a profile picture. So our input file type, the file input type does that. So let's add here a label. And in that label, we're going to have upload a profile picture, space, and then an input with the type set to file. Oh, y'all are going to like this. Check it out. It's already showing up, which is so cool. Alrighty. So there's a field set, there's a label, field set again. Does that look good? Ah, amazing. Let's keep going. So we're going to add another label after that first one with the text input your age, years, and then nest an input with the type of number. Let's do that real quick. So we're going to have a label. And inside that label, we're going to have input your age and years. And I'm going to copy that because I'm lazy. Ooh, Gabriel's asking a question. I'm going to bookmark this because this is a really good question. I'm interested to see how to fix it. So, input your time, age, and years. We need to add our input. If I could spell, there we go. Our type is set to number. There we go. Now, because it used the type number, we're already seeing our browser be like, okay, cool, I know how to do a number thing. Notice when I hover, these little arrows show up. They're a little bit small, but I hope you can see them. And like you can press the up one to go up and the down one to go down. Go negative. But of course, having negative age is not really realistic when you're filling out a form. So we're going to be using the min attribute of that input to say, well, you need to put 13 or more. So your age needs to be at least 13 in order to register. If I try again, notice what happens. It immediately went to 13. If I try to go down, it doesn't let me. If I try to, like, I don't know, put in 1, check this out. Oh, hold on. I need to fill in the rest of the form. Sorry. There we go. If I do it now, the value must be greater than or equal to 13. And we're going to do the same for the maximum age. So it cannot be more than 120. If somebody tries to submit the form with values outside of that range, a warning will appear. And we already gave it a try. Well, let's give it another try. We have time. Yeah. There we go. And let's put our age to be 900. Yep, value must be less than or equal to 200. If I try to go for negative 900, it's like, hold on, it should be at least 13. So that looks good. Does our code look good? It does. Wonderful. Let's keep going. Next, we're going to be using the select element. Excuse me. We're going to be using the select element to have a drop-down menu. So we're going to do that here. Below our two labels, we're going to add a select element. And you should see, there it is. There's our select. Doesn't do anything yet because what we need to have inside those are option elements. So one option element per option in the menu. For our example here, we want to have 5. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look at me being lazy. Now, if I open up that drop down, look, there's our 5. Wait, can you see them? Oh, no, you don't. I'm sorry. Well, but believe me, there's a little drop down that shows up with 5 empty options in it. One of them is ticked because I've selected one of them. Sorry, the screen share doesn't let me show you them. I got to figure out a way to do that. Anyway, let's check our code. And it looks good. Ah, cool. So now, we're going to nest, that is, put our select element inside a label element. That text should come before the select element. Cool, let's do that. So inside our select, outside our select, we're going to have a label with the text, how did you hear about us? Is that correct? Yep, the text should come before the select element. Great. So let's close that label here. Amazing. And there it is. How did you hear about us? And I'm going to go ahead and format my document just so that the alignment is nice, a little nicer for me. Amazing. So check our code. And there we go. Look at us just kicking the butt of this thing. So the drop-down options are currently empty. We're going to add the following text to each option element. So am I going to be lazy? I think I'm going to be lazy. I'm just going to hide the preview real quick so I can do this lazily. So first option is select. Sorry. Select one. Then there's Free Code Camp News. I keep clicking and it keeps dragging. Sorry about that. Free Code Camp YouTube channel. Free Code Camp forum. And other. Cool. So now we filled out all of those options. If we go back to the preview real quick, you're going to see that now it says select one here. Now here's the disappointing part. When I click on it, you're not going to be able to see the preview of the dropdown, but trust me, they're all in there, and I'll prove it sort of by selecting a different one. So here's news, and there's YouTube channel. You can see my mouse is kind of like doing it, but unfortunately it doesn't show the dropdown. Gaudia says copy and paste is an art. It really is. Like, it's good to type stuff out too, don't get me wrong. Okay, so there's our dropdown. So check our code, and it looks good. Amazing. I'm going to do a couple more of these, and then I'm going to let you all go because, well, I don't want to keep you all with my constant jabbering, and got to do some homework for tomorrow. I'm sorry to be mean. It's just, it's great fun to do this stuff. So where was I? Yes. So, submitting the form with an option selected would not send a useful value. So each option is going to need a value attribute. So the first option is going to have a value of empty. So just the quote marks. And then each option after that is going to have the values of 1 to 4. So that way, when I submit the form, the value for the select will be either empty, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there we go. Now we can't see it, but because it looks the same, but now when we're, you can't see it. You still can't see the drop down. I'm sorry. Now it still shows the text, but the value is going to be 1 through 4. So that looks good. Let's check our code. Wonderful. Yeah, we got time for a little bit more. So we're going to do the text area next. So this is kind of like an input of type text, but it can be much longer and have multiple rows of text. This is when you want to do something like write a bio or send an email or this sort of thing. So let's start with a label that says provide a bio. I'm going to click that there. copy that, sorry, at the end of the field set, and then we'll add a text area inside the label, and we'll need to close the text area. This is one that requires a closer. So not like an input, this one requires a closer. So label, provide a bio. So then we'll put a text area, and we will close that. Ooh, Cesium asks a good question, and I'm going to save that. So let's check our code. There we go. Ah, cool. So now we need to do our accessibility and link the inputs to the forms, the inputs to the labels using these IDs: profile picture, age, referrer, and bio. So first we'll start with the profile picture. So label is for profile picture. The input will have the ID of profile picture. So that's done. Next is age. For age, input ID of type age. So for age, ID age. Next is referrer. So for referrer, that's such a hard word to say, referrer. Now you might be wondering, cool, but where does the ID go? It doesn't go on the options. They have their own values. So it goes on the select ID referrer. And the last one is the bio. So go down here for bio ID bio. We did a lot. Doesn't change much how it looks because remember, this is for accessibility. But if we check our code, it passes. Ah, amazing. And I think this is the last one I'm going to do today, just to end right on time. So the text area appears to be too small. Is that true? Oh yeah, that looks pretty small. So we're going to give it an initial size using rows and cols, which is short for columns. So we're going to give it an initial size of 3 rows and 3 columns. Now you might be wondering, initial, what does that mean? I'll show you in just a minute. So let's go down to text area. So rows, and I already forgot. Is it 3? I think it's 3. 3 and 30. 3 rows. It's already a little bit taller. And cols or columns. Oh, yes, please do bring in those questions. So then cols of column 30. That's going to get super wide. Now, this is what they meant by initial. You see here at the bottom right, you can't quite see it, but there's a little bit of I think that the term is thingy. Sorry, a little bit of an icon there that lets us resize our text area. And you might have done this in browsers before. This just lets you make it as big as you like. And look, the browser is smart enough to resize everything else for you. This is the magic of HTML and CSS. So there we go. Gonna check our code, and it looks good. So we will stop here for today. Gonna be doing placeholders next. So we stopped at step 41. Before we go into Q&A, and I see some more questions going in, fantastic. Let's open up that curriculum to see where we're at and how much homework I'm being evil in giving y'all. So let's see, all the way down here. So we went up until lesson 41. And so the homework for tomorrow will be to do the rest of these until 65. And tomorrow we'll start off with the survey form, the first certification project, which I'm very excited about. So, but remember, this sounds stressful. Please do it at your own pace. Please remember that this is all recorded. You can ask questions in the Discord or on the forum. We're here to answer. And it's, meant to be done at your own pace with no stress. Yeah. Yep, as Jess very well puts it, there's no hard deadline. So please, please do this as is. Refer. It's a hard word to say. Referral for the referrer. Okay, let's go into some questions. So let's go with this first question from Mark, who's asking, since method post is more secure in terms of handling sensitive data entries to the form, what kind of form would be using get method be more appropriate. So usually a form is sending data, right? Like a browser is getting data when you go to a website. Like if I type in duckduckgo.com, I'm asking DuckDuckGo for the DuckDuckGo website. That's a GET request. Usually, forms will post data. Now, I might be wondering, well, why should I put in method post if it's usually going to be putting post? There are other types of methods like put. Put, for example, is a method that updates data. Not so post usually creates new data. Put updates data. So you might need to put method put. The reason we're making these distinctions is because a server or a piece of code running on a machine on a different computer um, needs to know what you're asking it for. So it might say, oh, you want to get some data? I'll send it to you. So to answer your question, what kind of form would be using the get method be more appropriate? I frankly can't think of an example of one because I don't think because most of the time, this is not going to be something you want to do. There might be that you want to use a get request because a server has made it a get request, but that's more of a design issue on the server side, in my opinion. I hope that answers your question. Um, ooh, we don't always include input elements within labels, right? I actually do most of the time, but let's look this up on MDN. I don't know if this is the right place to look, but let's give it a try. So we're looking at input. It's a bit big, my friend. I hope it's okay if I zoom out just a bit. Is that okay? Please let me know. I'm gonna be lazy. I'm gonna look for label. Okay, so for example, here it's not. Oh, it's not inside the label, but I don't know if you noticed. Oh, I love MDN. Like you can play around with this code, right? So I'm gonna remove the for. If I click on the label, nothing happens. But if I restore for name, that's the ID of this field. Now when I click on the label, I can. So sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. I think it helps to have them be in order to have them be in line, that is next to each other. Let's give that a try. Look at me being wrong all the time, huh? Can I make this bigger? I don't suppose I can. Maybe I can. What if I remove all this? I think this is just, oh, hold on. I have an idea. There we go. So labels are in line. Okay, let's give that a try again. And because labels are online, they'll be next to it. I've seen that usually you do. So it's not a bad thing. Oh, Cesam says try the MDN page for label. Thank you. Thank you. A caption for an item. Ooh, yeah. See here here still we're having them next to each other. So I don't know if there's a best practice. I can tell you from my experience. Oh, the form control such as input offers some major advantages. Programmatically associated when a user clicks or taps on a label. Ah, here we go. As long as this label for attribute matches the input's ID, they don't need to be inside. I believe if you wrap the input in the label, the for is not needed, but if not wrapped, then the for is needed. Yeah, and I think for the sake of accessibility best practices, you want to definitely like when in doubt, use the for and ID. Like always as when no, not even when in doubt, always use the for and ID. So I hope that's helpful. Would you line up all the input fields in CSS? Yes, absolutely. So what I would do is, for example, set a maximum width for the labels so that all the inputs next to them are consistently sized. I hope that's helpful. Uh, ooh, what's the difference between input type submit and button type submit since both produce the same output? That's a great question, and I think somebody posted an answer as well. Uh, Where did somebody post an answer for this? Maybe not. Let's take a look at the button element because they both look like buttons, and you're going to see this button tag show up as well. So let's take a look at what they say here for type, if I find it. Turns out there's a lot of types. There it is. So the button submits the form data to the server. If this is the default, if the attribute is not specified for buttons associated with a form, or if the attribute is an empty or invalid value. So, but why? Which one's better? Do you know what? We're gonna look this up because I don't know. Let's go to DuckDuckGo. So, should I use input type submit or button? Yeah, there we go. Let's see what Stack Overflow says. You see this a lot. Stack Overflow, if you're not familiar, is kind of a forum for asking questions about programming uh, and getting answers for them. Ooh, okay. Seeing some interesting conversation in the chat. So let's see what they say. Um, Buttons created with a button element function just like buttons created with the input element, but they offer richer rendering possibilities, which is, you said that here, Kira. Buttons can have pictures in them or images. Perfect. Oh, there you go. For example, a button element that contains an image functions like and may resemble an input element whose type is set to image, but the button element still allows content. So good to know. Thank you so much, Kira. Cesium also says something interesting here. In Discord, Andre posted that some screen readers fail to associate implicit labels, so they recommend always included the for, which is great. Because, yeah, you need to take into account different types of devices and screen readers. We have a question from Gabriel asking, how do we change that information to PTBR, where it shows no file chosen? Let's take a look. I wish I spoke Portuguese. I love that language. So, because right now on my browser, it says no file chosen. Now, I wonder, I have no idea if this is going to work. If I put in PTBR, maybe, as the language of my HTML, no, it doesn't seem to work. But I'm not one to give up. So what if we change, sorry, I'm in the settings of my browser, and I'm going to see what happens if I change the language of my browser. Add languages, Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. I'm going to add Brazilian Portuguese to my browser. I'm going to make it my top language. Can I do that? Move to the top. So now Portuguese Brazil is my preferred language. Now, if I refresh this, I have no idea what's going to happen. We're going to discover this together. Hold on. PTBR? Maybe it's underscore? Maybe I have to restart my browser. I seem to remember there being a way. Because so Spanish is my spoken language, and like sometimes I'll have a device in Spanish and it'll show, it'll show this in Spanish, but I don't know how to do it. Yeah. It depends on your browser. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. It's a good question though. I think it's going to depend on the browser. So this is going to be a dynamically done at the user level. So like depending on the browser, as said here already, depending on what the person using your website has as their browser language, it'll show up. And that's what I hoped to show with the settings on my Google Chrome, but I think I need to restart Chrome. I'm going to move English back to the top because I can't. I wish I could speak Portuguese, but I can't. Yeah, I hope that helps. Ooh, I remember what Cesium asked here. What it would send to the server if we didn't specify a value. Yes, and I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe this is the question about the select, right? So let me just close a preview here. So for a select, remember we had to specify a value, right? And the lesson was saying like, hey, if you don't specify a value, the content that it sends in is not very helpful. Now, I believe what it's going to do instead, if I leave out the values and I submit my form, it's going to instead submit the text as the value. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, that doesn't sound so bad. I can just check. If I'm like a backend developer, then I can just check what that text is, which is true. But bear in mind that if, for example, we use some fancy stuff to make our website have a different language depending on where you're from, what language you have set on your browser, then this is going to be either select one or seleccionar or auswählen. Sorry, my German's bad. Or uh, the equivalent in other spoken languages. So this is why we want to have a value for consistency. Because then we know it can't be something in a different language. It can be a value. So blank 1, 2, 3, or 4. Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Cesium, for asking. Ooh, Mark's got a question. The MDN website states that the value attribute is always optional, though it should be considered mandatory for checkbox, radio, and hidden. Hidden. Oh, input hidden. Is this accurate? If MDN says it is, then it is. So this is considered a best practice. So the thing about MDN is that it's an open resource that people can send their contributions to. So I would say, it's a good idea to have the value, because as you saw, like you could end up, because I think, hold on, where did I put that? Here, for example, we don't, as you saw, we don't have a value for these. And here I think we could put in a value for the radio buttons in order that when we submit them, instead of getting not a very helpful value, we have a very discrete one. So I hope that answers that. Oh, CSIM says, it's not possible to translate choose file and no file chosen, as those are native browser elements and depend on the browser's language. Thank you, Cesium. Oh, cool. And Clio Terolica says, if having all the browsers languages you need selected can be useful, I have 3 selected in Chrome. It works fine. Good to know. I sometimes get nervous. Well, folks, I think that's all of the questions answered. How about I let you all go so you can have a wonderful rest of your day? And remember, the homework is to do lessons part 31 through 65. And remember, don't be stressed about it if you don't get everything. If you get stuck, be sure to ask questions, please. We've got the Discord and we've got the forum. Hold on, where's that link to the Discord? Actually, let me just grab it again. Oh, you know what? While I'm here, let's look at that Bad Website Club website. So if you go to badwebsite.club, here you can find the free web development bootcamp. And there you'll find the link to the Discord, which I will post in here. There you go. And a Google Calendar if you want to follow along on your thing. I'm not logged in, but there's your Google Calendar. So I think that covers everything. Well, friends, thank you so much for joining. And remember, everything's on YouTube, youtube.com /at Bad Website Club. And I'll see you for the next one. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thanks for joining, and see you next time.